It's hard to believe that just days ago, we were talking about hope. Hope that the Ravens could salvage a season filled with disappointment. Hope that a healthy Lamar Jackson could reignite belief. Hope that recommitting to the run game, an unleashed Derrick Henry could be the formula to beat Pittsburgh and spark a playoff run. And for a moment, it almost happened. Derrick Henry, 128 yards on 20 carries. Lamar Jackson looking like vintage Lamar Jackson, ducking, diving, shedding defenders, pinpoint passes down the field. Zay Flowers looking like Zay Flowers, sure-handed, speed. Isaiah Likely climbing the ladder, awesome passes. And then the moment we've seen too many times before, the Ravens choked. Tyler Loop misses the go-ahead 44-yard field goal. Game over. Season over. Playoff hopes over. Super Bowl hopes over. Another win turned into a loss. Another season ends in heartbreak. Another chapter in a story Ravens fans are all too familiar with. Mark Andrews fumbling in the end zone. Rashad Bateman dropping a pass at the goal line. And now Tyler Loop missing the kick. Different players, different moments, same story, same result. Under John Harbaugh, these collapses, they weren't random. They were predictable. So when the accountability finally came, I wasn't shocked. The Ravens have fired John Harbaugh. 18 years, one Super Bowl, and an era defined by unrealized potential. So now, the only real question is, who is the next head coach to lead Lamar Jackson? Who protects his Super Bowl window? Who finally changes this culture when the moments get big? There are names surfacing. We're breaking it all down right now. I'm Rob Love. This is One Flock. Let's fly.
Let's go Ravens, let's go Ravens, let's go Ravens, let's go Ravens. We are one flock, we are one flock, we are one flock, we are one flock.
Welcome back to One Flock. Again, I'm your host, Rob Love, and this is where we do everything Baltimore Ravens and so much to break down. If this is your first time here, thank you for coming. If you're coming back and you're already part of the family here, the part of the flock, thank you for being here. We're quickly growing. We're a new channel. We just celebrated our one-year anniversary just a couple of days ago. I couldn't be more excited to have you here. And so thank you. If you haven't already liked, if you haven't already subscribed, now's a great time to do it. As you'll see, we're about to have a great time together. But before we get into what we're doing, I want to say that we're going to be talking a lot of truth. Some of it's uncomfortable, but it deserves an honest discussion. We're talking about John Harbaugh being fired. Some were shocked. Some in Ravens Nation have been, split on whether this was the way to go. But I just want to be truthful and fully transparent and honest, and I hope we can all do that. And here is that truth. John Harbaugh did not fail in Baltimore because he lacked effort. He didn't fail because he didn't care. And he did not fail because he was not respected. For a long time, John Harbaugh was a good coach for this organization. But good is no longer good enough when you are wasting a generational window. John Harbaugh's greatest failure, and the reason the Harbaugh era had to end is this. He built a culture that collapsed in the biggest moments. What do I mean by that? That culture that John Harbaugh built was predictable by the end. Leadership is always reflected in the discipline, the composure, the continuity of the group that is being led. And there's no denying this truth. When the moment was biggest, the John Harbaugh-led Ravens made mental errors repeatedly. Not occasionally, not by accident, routinely. Missed assignments, poor situational awareness, questionable decisions, coaches and players. Execution breaking down in the biggest moment. These were not isolated incidents. They were a pattern, and patterns are culture. And if you want to dispute me on that, think about this. Tell me if I'm wrong. You would never, and I'm saying this with 100% certainty, you would never see a Bill Belichick coached team routinely, consistently beat itself in critical moments. Any dispute there? How about this? You would never see an Andy Reid coached team repeatedly implode when they were controlling the game. Why is that? Think about it. Because inside those organizations, there is a reason, and I'm about to tell you what it is. It's because everyone in there knows that that type of collapse is unacceptable. Those teams are groomed mentally and structurally for the moment. They are prepared. They know that there is no room for that type of lackadaisical execution when everything is on the line. And let's be clear about something. That's what the Ravens need right now. Because if the Ravens do not fix this now, they will waste the remainder of the Lamar Jackson era. He just turned 29. He is very much in his prime. Everybody was right when they said that the Baltimore Ravens should be the Super Bowl favorites at the beginning of this season. Prime Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry running the most efficient rushing experience in his illustrious career. More offensive weapons than Lamar Jackson has ever had, all kinds of talent on the defense, and they missed the playoffs. That can't be blamed on talent. And when you look back at this season, the crazy thing is it ended the exact same way it started. Week 1, Buffalo, Lamar Jackson looking brilliant. What were we up by? 14 points, 4 minutes left to go in the game, and they choked the game away. Week 18, what was so different? Nothing. Against Pittsburgh, Lamar Jackson was brilliant again. Had the Ravens in position to win. He was slipping and dipping and diving and pinpoint dart passes, big plays down the field. Zay Flowers, sticky hands, the speed. Isaiah Likely makes the big catch. And the Ravens choke. That's not coincidence, folks. That is culture. John Harbaugh has lost more games in which his team held double-digit leads in the fourth quarter than any coach in recent history, possibly ever. I didn't go back and look into the deep annals of time to see if ever in the early 1900s was there a guy who did this as routinely as John Harbaugh. Those losses didn't just happen to John. They happened under him. So this decision wasn't about disrespecting John Harbaugh's legacy. It wasn't. It was about acknowledging reality. And here's what we need to acknowledge as well. With him being gone, the next head coach that comes to the Baltimore Ravens has to bring four things, and I'm going to enunciate them clearly now. Number one, he's got to bring discipline in high-pressure moments. That's been missing, sorely missing from the Baltimore Ravens under the John Harbaugh regime. That has to be there. Number two, he has to bring accountability that does not bend. Everyone has to know if you're accountable, if you're not doing it, if you're not cutting it, you're not starting every week, Falele. You're not starting every week, Voorhees. I don't care who we're putting in. We'll put somebody else in. But accountability that does not bend. He also has to bring a staff that can combine defensive dominance and offensive intelligence and creativity. You got to have both. And finally, he's got to bring a system that fully unleashes Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, and a roster full of talent, their full potential. If he doesn't bring those four things, then his name, whoever he is, cannot be a realistic option for the Baltimore Ravens and deserves no consideration. Because talent without discipline is wasted potential. And the Ravens can no longer afford that. So today we're going to look into the top head coaching candidates' names that have been surfacing, who they are, what they bring, and whether they actually fix the problem that ended with the John Harbaugh era. Now, some of these names make sense. Some of them, frankly, do not. So, yes, there are some names floating around right now that, honestly, I would not consider for this job, and I am praying that no one in the organization is. And I'm going to explain why as best I can. I'm not interested in first-time head coaches who haven't cut their teeth on anything, and now you're going to hand them prime Lamar Jackson in his window. Lamar Jackson doesn't need an experiment. He needs leadership right now that's ready to go. I'm also not interested in these culture-only hires. You know the guys. They got great culture, talk toughness, but they don't bring any of the schematic prowess or control or authority for a staff that is needed. We just lived through that. I'm absolutely not interested in a recycled coordinator who's already failed, disappeared for a while, and now wants to reappear and use Lamar Jackson's window as a shot at redemption. No, that's not it. Some of the names we're talking about today, they matter and others don't. We are going to break it all down. But before we get into what head coach should be the next Ravens head coach, I want to take a quick second. Definitely thank today's sponsor, AG1, because if we're being honest, this season took a toll on me. I know it took a toll by the comments on a lot of you guys as well. And not just physically, but also mentally, emotionally. I've been gassed. It's been tough. And one thing I've learned is that when life gets your margins thin and your routine gets affected, that's when what you do matters most. And AG1 is a 1 scoop a day foundational nutrition drink. It's loaded with 75 vitamins, prebiotics, probiotics, whole food source nutrients. And it supports gut health, immunity, and recovery. And I use it because it's simple, it tastes great, and it helps fill the gaps when life or the football season gets a little bit hectic. And right now, if you use the One Flock link, it's in the description. They're actually giving first-time customers over $100 in free products. You can't lose on this. It's 1 scoop a day. It's simple, clean, and effective. Give it a try. You'll be glad you did. Now, let's talk about the most important decision this organization has had to make and been faced with since drafting Lamar Jackson. My number one candidate, drum roll, bing. Now, this is going to throw some of you guys off. But hear me out. You ready for this? My top choice right now, John Gruden. John Gruden. And I know that's going to be polarizing, but hear me out on this. I'm going to pull this up. Take a look at this. Now, what were the 4 things that we said that any coach that we hire in this critical time in the Ravens window with Lamar Jackson? What was the first one? Discipline in big moments. Discipline. Do you realize that John Gruden, when he won Super Bowl 37 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in his very first year there, he became the very first NFL coach to ever, when changing teams, win a Super Bowl in that very first year with the new team? Big moment. He installed the discipline and culture right away. No one else has ever done that. All the storied coaches in the history of the NFL, no one else has ever done that. He did it. What was the second thing we said? We said that the coach needs to be accountable and build accountability within the team that does not bend. The Gruden grind is a real thing. It is already legendary what the practices, what the behind-the-scenes grind under John Gruden is. This is no secret. Accountability is something that is built into his reputation, into the culture that has made John Gruden John Gruden. That's what this team needs. He brings that. He checks that box. What about that third one we talked about? A staff that can combine defensive dominance and offensive intelligence. John Gruden's so well connected, so well known within the NFL. His reach is long and deep. He can put together a staff. He can put together the guys who can be handling an offense, handling a defense, and making sure that all this talent on both sides of the ball, the Ravens can make it happen. Did you know that at the beginning of the 2025 season, the Baltimore Ravens called in John Gruden to evaluate their roster? That means he already has a lot of intel on the players, weaknesses, strengths. He's already spent time breaking down this team. That familiarity gives him a jump start right away on maximizing this team's potential because he's already brings an awareness to the Ravens organization. He was the consultant they called in to evaluate the roster. And that last thing we said, he's got to have a system that will allow him to fully unleash Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, all these weapons. Do you guys know that Gruden, as the quarterback whisperer, has a reputation there? And do you know how he got it? Look at this graphic here. Look at this. Anybody ever heard of Rich Gannon? NFL MVP, Rich Gannon. He was a pedestrian quarterback, and Gruden turned him into an MVP. We're talking about proven quarterback development track record. So if you hand Gruden, a guy who's already owning NFL record books like Lamar Jackson, if you can maximize Rich Gannon, what can you do with an already 2-time, should be 3-time MVP? He just checks so many boxes, guys. Now, I know he's got some history that people want to talk about. I wasn't happy about when it happened. People make mistakes. Guys make mistakes. There's been people who've spoken up, on the personal side with Gruden. I don't know about all of that, but I do know that as far as a head coach, a coaching candidate that needs to establish quickly the type of discipline, accountability, offensive scheme, defensive scheme, staff, culture. This guy checks all those boxes. His culture has been identified as high intensity, disciplined. The heavy personnel specialists that he uses in a lot of his offenses with the fullback and the tight ends, that matches our roster. Patrick Ricard, all the tight ends that we use, we're not talking about trying to change apples into oranges, bringing in a guy like John Gruden. And that's why when you're talking about somebody who can step in right away and prove that he can take you to your highest potential, to any team's highest potential, the Super Bowl, he did it. He's done it already. It's proven. It's not an experiment. It's not a, can the guy get it done? Does he know the right people? Can he put a staff together? Is he disciplined? None of those questions. And that's why, for me, John Gruden's one of the first phone calls I'm making if I'm the Ravens right now. But who would be my second call? And I think this guy right here absolutely needs to be called, absolutely needs to be getting interviewed, and that's Brian Flores. Brian Flores, he's a defensive coordinator with the Minnesota Vikings. If you've been paying attention, this guy's pedigree, he came up under the Belichick tree. We're just talking about Belichick and the discipline. It's legendary. Everybody knows it was no nonsense on a Bill Belichick team. No nonsense. The guy wouldn't smile, right? The discipline, the expectation, the accountability, that's all well documented. That's what Brian Flores brings. Not only that, but his defensive prowess at Minnesota in points allowed this past season, 7th in yards, 3rd in pass defense, 2nd in rush defense. They had some struggles. I think a lot of that had to do with personnel. In takeaways, getting those possessions that you need to get to give your powerful offense more chances. Top 10. EPA, 4th. This team showed a lot of positive check marks. And that's not personnel bound. It's not because the Minnesota Vikings had the top defensive players in the country. Flores has consistently shown the ability to get the most out of a defense with whatever personnel he has. And discipline and being within the moment, not the moment being too big for his teams, is something that's characteristic. And that's something the Ravens need. Ravens have gotten away from the defensive personality, their defensive DNA. A guy like Brian Flores immediately brings that back. And what happens if you get that defense back that can give Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry more possessions, more times to score? This guy come in and bring a great offensive coordinator on staff, that could be really scary, really fast. And again, the accountability, the culture. You're talking about the Bill Belichick tree. That's my number 2 call. Gruden, this guy, either one of those, I think you got a great hire. A great hire. Who am I calling third? This guy right here. Now, he's an offensive coordinator. This is not a defensive mind. With these coordinators, now, Mike LaFleur with the Rams, obviously, we know what the Rams offense has been doing. Now, there is a concern there, and we have to talk about it. And, of course, that is that Mike LaFleur, while he is the offensive coordinator, it's kind of like being the offensive coordinator on an Andy Reid team, right? You know, Andy Reid is very much as head coach calling those plays. McVay at the Rams is calling the plays. So the only question mark really is how much of the success that the Los Angeles offense is having is connected to Mike LaFleur. Now, he may be coming up with the schemes, and we don't know. We don't know how much he's actually involved with that, how much credit could really go to him. But if you look at the numbers of that offense, you can't, first in points, first in yards, first in passing offense, 7th in rushing offense, turnovers, they're 4th, EPA set. Those numbers, whoa, right? The only question mark, and this is why he's the third call for me, is because I don't know how much of that is Mike LaFleur and how much of that is McVay. Do you? If there was some way to bona fide that Mike LaFleur is the guy who's responsible for these numbers, then yeah, he could move on up the list. But because we don't know, and we're not in a situation, as I said before, where we can experiment with guys that are unproven, but still, you can't ignore this pedigree. Again, Mike LaFleur, he comes from the Shanahan tree. Shanahan, we know what kind of offense he runs. It wouldn't be a surprise. Lamar in a Shanahan-style offense, my goodness, man. Shanahan makes guys that he's making Brock Purdy look like that dude, right? Imagine Lamar Jackson in that type of scheme with the weapons that he has. There is potential here. Definitely worth a call. Mike LaFleur, that's my third call. What are you guys thinking so far, these picks? Let me know. Keep the comments rolling. Number 4 pick, Jesse Minter. This is where we go back to defense, getting that defensive identity back. He's interesting. Jesse Minter is interesting, and his name has come up. I wasn't surprised because what he's been doing with the Chargers as the defensive coordinator is impressive. It's impressive. And think about this. Jesse Minter has roots with the Ravens. He was the DB coach for the Baltimore Ravens from 2017 to 2020. Look at these numbers. Top 10. The Chargers defense. Anybody remember a guy named Odafe Owe? Under this dude, Jesse Minter, Odafe Owe is a sack monster. That happened. Jesse Minter, if he could get a good offensive coordinator on staff with him, I think the defense, a lot of people compare this guy to kind of like a young equivalent, or I wouldn't say equivalent, but kind of in the same narrative as McDonald, who we had here. Young guys, great defensive minds, have demonstrated that they can get the most out of a defense. And really, as these numbers illustrate, I mean, the numbers don't lie. This could be a guy. This could be a guy. And again, with him being young, you're not talking about a guy like, some of the other guys we talked about who are older and maybe set in their ways. But when you get these young talents, Jesse Minter has shown that at least as far as the defense, he knows how to make that thing work. When they get in the interview, that might reveal how much, what can a young guy do as far as putting a staff together? There's some question marks there. And again, that's why he's number 4 on the list. But certainly, once again, worth a call. Who's my next phone call? Robert Saleh. Definitely not real excited about this guy. He does come from the Shanahan tree. He's there now as their defensive coordinator. San Francisco's defense has been loaded with talent. Consistently, San Francisco puts out good defenses. This year, you see the numbers. You see that rushing defense leaves a lot to be desired. But the pass, the secondary, really, really great numbers there. Great play. He does have experience as a head coach. Obviously, that experience at the Jets was not good. Ended up being a short stay there. But who has ever had success at the Jets? It's just a poorly run franchise. But there's still a lot of questions. And at this point, this is why he's getting towards the very bottom of the list. This is desperation mode if you're still looking for a guy, in my mind. Because, again, there's too many questions and not enough solid answers. I'm not really looking at this and going, hey, this is a surefire. And I'm trying to keep this pick, if I'm the Baltimore Ravens, to a surefire. I know if I get this guy, it's just a matter of time. It's not a matter of if. It's not a matter of maybe. I'm removing question marks in terms of what's going to be the result of pairing this head coach with this talented roster and this generational quarterback in Lamar Jackson, this Hall of Fame bound running back, Derrick Henry. What's going to be the result? I don't want question marks there. I want to just know. The only question mark I want to know is how quickly it happens. And you don't necessarily have that with this guy. But does he get a call? Of course, that's why his name's coming up, because he is associated Shanahan tree. He has been part of some very successful defenses, and he has some experience being a head coach that admittedly was not beautiful at the Jets. This guy, now we're to the part of the list where I'm like, these are the guys I'm not calling at all. If it's up to me, their names are coming up. That's why we're talking about them. Kevin Stefanski, how do you go from John Harbaugh, who highly criticized for stubbornly holding on to his own philosophies, no matter how much the facts show that what he was doing was flawed, wrong. Namely, decisions like, I'm going to keep on keeping Falele and Voorhees in, and I'm not trying anything else because I said it would be a good idea, so I'm sticking by my guns. despite the fact that it's obvious I'm wrong. Kevin Stefanski is the only other coach I can think of who's just as bad, if not worse. The quarterback situation in Cleveland this year, don't tell me about all the coach of the years, this, that, and the other. I don't get swayed by that type of stuff because you and I both know people vote for their coach of the year, and what they're looking at when they decide to do it, I don't know. I mean, I know some guys voted Josh Allen as MVP in a year where Lamar Jackson made history from the quarterback position and dominated. People voted on that. Doesn't change the fact that Lamar Jackson was way better than Josh Allen in that year. Way more valuable as a player in the NFL than Josh Allen ever was in that year. So Kevin Stefanski being voted coach of the year 2 years, whenever that happened, okay, that sounds nice. But look at what he did on the field when it came to head coach decisions. The keeping Shedeur Sanders out stubbornly when he was obviously head and heels a better option than Gabriel. And you see what happened when they started putting Shedeur in. Even though he hadn't been practicing with the ones, even though he didn't have the time and experience, in just a few games, he looked more comfortable, executing better, all of that, as the QB than Gabriel. The head coach had to know that. How did everyone else see it? And Stefanski wants to stubbornly stick by what he was doing for his own, whatever those reasons were. Whatever those personal reasons were, if your personal reasons are jeopardizing the success of the team, you don't need to be coach. Not for my Ravens, not for your Ravens. We don't need that type of stubbornness. We've seen that already. That's ego-based. Stefanski obviously read his own press. He thinks he's the coach of the year too, and he knows better than everybody. And to a certain extent, you got to have some of that, but not so much of it that you start doing stuff that's clearly not the right decision and you're too egotistical to change it. The Browns were terrible under Kevin Stefanski this year, and they didn't have to be as bad as they were. His coaching was a big part of it. So, no, he's not getting a call from me, but his name's coming up, so we had to talk about it. What do you guys think? You think that he should be a top coaching candidate for the Baltimore Ravens? That's a solid no from me, and I'd like to hear what you have to say. Last guy on the list, and as I talk about it more, maybe he shouldn't be the last guy on the list. Maybe he should be the second to last, but this too is a guy I'm not calling. But his name's coming up, so we're talking about it. Who's Cliff Kingsbury? Well, we know who he is. He coaches the Washington Commanders. Last year, big drop-offs in the offense. The reason his name is on there because we know what he did in the previous year with this rookie quarterback that everybody was thinking was going to be the next Lamar. Every time you get a new guy, right, that is super talented, athletic, good arm, they're like, is this the next Lamar Jackson? Not the next Lamar Jackson, but had a great offensive breakout year as a rookie. Fell off big time in his second year. If we think back to when he was at Arizona as the head coach with Kyler Murray. Big numbers and then quickly maximized one season and then fell off. Never returned to that again. I don't know what the explanation for that is, but I know I see a pattern. Is that who you want to bring in for the Baltimore Ravens? Not I, says the Rob man. I believe that this is a guy who I understand why his name is coming up, but is he a serious candidate in my estimation of it? No, absolutely not. But these are the main names you've been hearing. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about Gruden. I have heard a couple people mention Gruden. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, none of these names that we're talking about right now, do I have any insider information on that this is actually who the Ravens are talking to or who they're interviewing. I don't have any of that information. What I do know is that these names are being talked about, and a lot of them are coming up frequently. Scary that they're bringing up the Browns coach. If I hear one more talking head talk about, that this would be a great guy, he won Coach of the Year 2 times, what does that matter? What does that matter? Do you realize that every knockoff product online out there puts in their advertisement, oh, we won Best of the Year? Who'd you win it from? You did a survey in your neighborhood and everybody voted and said yours is the best of the year. Okay, you won it. It's legitimate. But how meaningful is that? Stop putting a bunch of meaning in these meaningless awards like Coach of the Year that mean less and less when they really come down to media members who have their own biases, however shallow, however in-depth. It all kind of shakes out. Some years it may be more meaningful than others. But when I'm looking at a guy like Stefanski, I am not looking at how many coaches of the year have you won. How many media members loved you? That's not what I'm looking at. It's not what the Ravens should be looking at. They should be looking at, do you bring the accountability? Do you bring the culture? Do you bring in the big moments, your team is disciplined and ready? Do you bring the ability to maximize a roster like what the Ravens have? A generational talent like Lamar Jackson? Do you bring the staff? If you don't bring all those things, then your name shouldn't be on the list, and that's why, to me, Stefanski, he's not on there. So there you have it. Those are some of the top names surfacing as Baltimore Ravens are searching for a coach who will oversee the next chapter of the Lamar Jackson run. But what do you think? Put that in the comments right now. Do any of these candidates that we just talked about, do any of these names get you excited? Do you agree with me that Gruden is a guy that should get a call? Do you like Brian Flores? Really, either one of those two hires, and I'm happy. I think the Ravens are in excellent condition with either of those two. I think immediately with either of those two hires, you're back in Super Bowl contention if you can shore up the defensive line and shore up the O-line. I think with the talent the Ravens have right now and either of those two coaches, we got a real conversation next year about a Super Bowl. So there you have it. Some of the top names surfacing as the Baltimore Ravens are searching for their next coach who's going to oversee the next chapter. But there's another question we cannot ignore. And some of you probably saw this one coming, but I got to ask it. And that question is Eric DeCosta safe? Is he? You know, I ask this because the next coach for Lamar Jackson, he's going to need protection for Lamar Jackson. He's going to need pass rush help for the defense. He's going to need fewer roster blind spots. That's a question I have to ask because while I do admit that Eric DeCosta has had several bright spots during his tenure as the manager of the team, I mean, we've got some great pickups. Zay Flowers, who's complaining about that guy, right? Who's complaining about Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum, Isaiah Likely? I'm not complaining about any of those guys. Are you? Who's complaining about, doing the Derrick Henry trade, right? But again, there's some glaring, costly. And when I say costly, I'm not talking about minimalistically. I'm talking about costly on a level to where why I believe is the main reason that we're sitting after week 18. I think this, in spite of Harbaugh's failures, if you had an O-line that could protect Lamar Jackson, if you could generate a real pass rush, we could have overcome Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry could have overcome Zay Flowers. Those guys could have overcome just through pure talent. Through pure talent and possessions. They could have overcome a lot of Harbaugh's fallacies. But you couldn't overcome both. You couldn't overcome Harbaugh and his culture and overcome EDC's failure to provide protection for the quarterback, time for routes to develop, time for Derrick Henry to get a hit of steam, extra possessions from having a real pass rush, pressure on the other team's quarterback. This team couldn't overcome both of those things. So the question remains, is EDC safe? What do you guys think? Let me know. We'll keep a very close eye on him and this situation and see how it develops because nothing, as we've seen, nothing is at this point in stone. We are in a flux situation, and I wouldn't be surprised by anything at this point because I think Bisciotti has made it clear right now that he is serious because there's no secret the relationship that he and John Harbaugh have had. They've been very close. That's why a lot of people thought this wouldn't happen. A lot of people thought Bisciotti would not make this call. Now, of course, the news that I'm hearing is that it came down to Bisciotti wanted some of the coordinators under Harbaugh replaced, and Harbaugh stood on business and said, no, I'm not getting rid of them. So Bisciotti was like, well, I'm getting rid of you and them. That fits the profile. Harbaugh has been, loyal to a fault in a lot of cases, as we've seen with Falele and Voorhees and things like that. So I can see that happening. But we'll keep an eye on it. I'm excited. I wish I was excited about the playoffs and a Super Bowl, but right now I'm excited because if this hire goes correct, the Ravens really could have new life, new air, and a new culture that's necessary and just in time to ride out the rest of this window, this generational window that no longer is going to be stifled by the culture that John Harbaugh has had us all victimized by over the past 8 years. And for that, I'm excited. Love to hear what you guys think about it. For right now, though, that's what we've got. As things develop, I will be keeping you updated. Once again, I want to say a big thanks to AG1 for being this episode's sponsor. One scoop a day, over $100 in free bonus products with the One Flock link that is in the description. You guys make sure you take advantage of that. And remember, when you support our sponsors, you support One Flock. And I love you and I appreciate you guys for being here. Once again, please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell so you get every episode that we have coming up. We need to figure out, I know now that we're not playing anymore, we can't do any more when the clock hits 0 until next season. But we're going to figure out what days we're going to do some live shows because we need to keep the live shows going. I need to get you guys on here. We need to talk about this. We need to see what you guys are thinking. I love to hear that kind of thing. I'm staying in the comments, but we need to do better than that. I'm going to miss you guys if I ain't doing the live. So we're going to figure out what days we're going to do live. But in the meantime, I'm your host, Rob Love, reminding you that if there's one thing this world will never be too full of, that thing is love. So I want you to find somebody who needs a little bit more love in their life and give it to them for you, right? Y'all know my last words. Thanks for flying with the brother. We'll see you back next time on One Flock. Pay attention. Keep that notification bell on because as things change, we'll be right here with you. This is what we do. Let's fly. See you back next time.
We take the field as one flock. No Ravens, here we go as one flock. We keep grinding till we soar to the top. Come on, Ravens, here we go as one flock. We keep grinding till we soar to the top. Let's go Ravens, let's go Ravens, let's go Ravens, let's go Ravens. We are one flock, we are one flock, we are one flock, we are one flock.
Everything out of me, they gonna get a Super Bowl out of me.